3 days without water. That's all it takes for the human body to shut down. For soldiers stranded in the Pacific jungles, trapped in North African deserts, or cut off behind enemy lines in Europe, finding clean water wasn't just important. It was the difference between survival and death. During World War II, thousands of soldiers found themselves in situations where supply lines were broken, canteens were empty, and the nearest clean water source was miles away or controlled by the enemy. When you can't march to a river and you can't wait for resupply, you look up at the sky and hope for rain. Rainwater collection became a survival skill that saved countless lives during the war. But collecting rain isn't as simple as opening your mouth and waiting. Soldiers had to use whatever materials they had, understand timing and weather, and know how to store water safely in conditions where everything from disease to enemy fire was a constant threat. In this video, we'll look at the methods World War II soldiers used to collect rainwater, the equipment they carried, and the desperate ingenuity that kept them alive when no other water source existed. Every soldier in World War II carried standard-issue equipment, and much of it could be adapted for water collection. The most important item was the shelter half. This was a rectangular piece of canvas that two soldiers could button together to form a pup tent. But in a survival situation, that same canvas became a rainwater collector. The technique was simple but effective. Soldiers would stretch the shelter half between trees or stakes, creating a sloped surface. The lowest point would funnel into a helmet, canteen, or any container available. A single night of steady rain could fill multiple canteens this way. Helmets themselves were multi-purpose tools. The M1 steel helmet had a removable liner. Soldiers quickly learned that the steel outer shell made an excellent water basin. It could hold about 2 quarts. During rain, soldiers would position helmets at angles to catch runoff from tent canvas or even from the brims of their own helmets while standing guard. Ponchos and raincoats served double duty. Soldiers would spread them flat with the edges raised, creating a shallow pool. Some would tie the corners to create a hanging reservoir. The water would collect in the center and could be poured carefully into canteens. Gas mask bags, once emptied of their primary equipment, became emergency water carriers. They weren't ideal since the rubberized canvas could affect taste, but in desperate situations, taste didn't matter. In the Pacific theater, soldiers used even more creative methods. Bamboo stalks, when cut at an angle, formed natural gutters. Large tropical leaves were shaped into funnels. Some units cut sections of aircraft fabric from damaged planes and stretched them across jungle clearings. The key to all these methods was surface area. The larger the collection area, the more water you could gather in a short time. But the challenge wasn't just catching the rain. It was keeping it clean and safe to drink. Collecting rainwater sounds straightforward, but in combat conditions, everything became complicated. The first challenge was timing. Rain doesn't fall on command. In some theaters like the Pacific, monsoons were predictable. Soldiers could prepare collection systems knowing heavy rain would come. But in North Africa or parts of Europe, rainfall was sporadic. A soldier might set up collection equipment and wait days for rain that never came. Weather patterns also affected water quality. The first few minutes of rainfall often carried dust, dirt, and debris from the atmosphere and from whatever surface the water ran across. Experienced soldiers learned to let the first runoff go to waste, then start collecting once the rain had washed surfaces clean. Contamination was a constant concern. Canvas treated with waterproofing chemicals could taint the water. Metal containers might rust. Helmets worn in combat could transfer oil, dirt, or even traces of blood into collected rainwater. Soldiers were trained to rinse collection surfaces when possible, but in the field, this wasn't always an option. Storage presented another problem. Collected water had to be kept secure. Canteens could be punctured by shrapnel. Improvised containers might leak. And in tropical climates, standing water attracted insects within hours. Mosquitoes would breed in any open container, turning a life-saving water source into a disease vector. Then there was the tactical risk. Setting up rainwater collection systems took time and made positions more visible. A stretched canvas catching moonlight could give away a hidden position. The sound of water dripping into metal containers carried in the quiet of night. In some cases, soldiers had to choose between the risk of dehydration and the risk of detection. Rationing was another challenge. A soldier needs about half a gallon of water per day in moderate conditions, more in heat, or during physical exertion. A full canteen held 1 quart. That means a soldier needed to refill twice daily just to meet minimum needs. When rain was the only source, every drop had to be carefully managed and shared among the unit. Despite all these challenges, rainwater collection kept soldiers alive in situations where they otherwise would have perished. The methods were simple, but the execution required discipline, patience, and constant vigilance. Rainwater collection wasn't just theory. It saved lives in documented cases throughout the war. In the Pacific, Marines cut off during the Battle of Guadalcanal survived for days using helmet and poncho collection methods while waiting for supply lines to reopen. The tropical storms that made fighting miserable also kept canteens full. In North Africa, British and Commonwealth forces trapped during the siege of Tobruk relied on rainwater collection during the brief rainy season. Every soldier was ordered to maximize collection during storms because the next rain might not come for weeks. Downed air crews and life rafts carried emergency rain collection kits. These included rubber catchment sheets and instructions for creating water stills. Pilots floating in the Pacific or Atlantic knew that rain was often their only chance of survival until rescue arrived. Even in Europe, soldiers caught behind enemy lines during winter operations collected snow and rain. Melted snow provided water, but fresh rainwater was preferred because it required no fuel to process and carried less risk of contaminants from the ground. The lessons learned from World War II rainwater collection became part of military survival training that continues today. Modern survival kits still include variations of the same shelter half principle. Special forces are trained in water procurement methods that trace directly back to techniques developed by soldiers in the 1940s. Rainwater collection during World War II was more than a survival technique. It was a testament to human adaptability under pressure. Soldiers took everyday equipment and transformed it into life-saving tools. They learned to read weather, improvise solutions, and make the most of whatever nature provided. In the end, wars are won not just by firepower and strategy, but by the ability of soldiers to survive in impossible conditions. For thousands of World War II soldiers, that survival depended on looking up at the clouds and knowing exactly what to do when the rain finally came.